Everybody. Wow. Wow. Welcome to the State Department on this Wednesday in April. In fact, today, April 6th, marks the third anniversary of the death of Anne Smedinghoff, a bright rising star in the Foreign Service, who was taken away from her family, her friends, and the department in an attack that took place 3 years ago in Zabul province, Afghanistan. Anne was 25 years old and on her second tour as an FSO, Foreign Service officer, serving as a press officer at the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. In Secretary Kerry's words at the time, Anne was a, quote, vivacious, smart, and capable individual, end quote. And as he wrote in a note that went out to all State Department employees at the time, shortly after that tragic event, he wrote that no one anywhere should forget for a minute that the work of our diplomats is hard and hazardous, or that as you serve, you being the diplomats, serve on the front lines in the world's most dangerous places, you put the interests of our country and those of our allies and partners ahead of your own safety, end quote. We would also pay tribute, obviously, to the memories of the 3 U.S. soldiers, as well as an Afghan-American translator and an Afghan doctor who were also lost on that tragic day, as well as to those who were injured in that incident. We honor their memories and their service to the United States and Afghanistan. With that said, Matt?
Right. I have a legal question, which I don't think you'll be able to answer, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway.
Go ahead.
Knowing that you'll probably refer me to the Department of Justice. But, so yesterday or late yesterday, there was a filing in the FOIA email FOIA case, one of them, on the discovery, the order to grant discovery.
Right.
And I'm just curious about this because I haven't actually seen the order. I've just read the stories about it. What does the department, through its lawyers, claim to be its standing for trying to limit the scope of questions asked of ex-employees?
So,
I mean, I can understand why you would be making a motion on behalf of current employees, and I could probably even understand why you say that they're being asked about their activities while they were in government. But this seems to be something that, I mean, shouldn't their own lawyers be making this kind of a motion? Why is the State Department making it?
So I appreciate the question and understand your interest in the story. You are correct insofar as, well, first of all, we did submit a filing with the court last night on this matter. But I cannot comment on the actual content of that court filing because this is something that's already, or that is a matter of ongoing litigation. So I can't even comment on your question because it would speak to this
Can you tell
matter
me
that's
if
still
it
in
says
litigation.
in there? I mean, maybe I'm just completely
I don't have it in
naive
front
and
of me.
ignorant about this,
Yeah.
but does it explain in this motion how it is that the department has standing to make such a request on behalf of a former employee?
Again, I can't speak specifically to this matter, but I can say that, departments engaged on any given year in litigation before federal courts, administrative and arbitral tribunals, and depending on the facts, applicable procedures and nature of the claims, we do. There may be discovery, but it is case by case.
No, I understand
so,
that.
yeah.
I mean, the answer to my question could be very, very simple. That it could be that it's
You're asking
completely
whether it
normal
applies
since-
to ex-employees.
No, it does. I know that the motion does cover them. I'm just curious as to what the
rationale is.
Right. I mean, it may be very straightforward that because they're being asked to talk about stuff they did while they were in government, that you do have some kind of standing to speak on
And I
their
will see if I
behalf.
can
And I'm just wondering
get you any more clarity
right.
on that, but I
Thanks.
have to just preface that by saying
Okay.
I am restricted in what I can say when something that's on ongoing litigation. Anyway,
Can I raise change the subject?
of course you can.
You've probably seen the Dutch-Ukraine voters today.
I did.
And I know you ahead of time, I think it was Friday, the State Department encouraged the Dutch voters to obviously vote yes in favour of this treaty with Ukraine, saying that it would help the country and push reforms. But it looks like a no vote's going to go through. Do you think in any way that this could change the dynamics for Ukraine? Do you believe that this vote was not about Ukraine, that it might be about a EU-wide unification vote instead? Poroshenko called it unfair timing on Friday at the nuclear summit. So just trying to get your...
No, and I appreciate the question. I'm not going to go further. We don't have a clear results yet in the referendum, so it would be premature for me. Even if speculation indicates that it may be a no vote, it'd be premature for me to declare one way or the other. So my understanding is that it's still, the final results are still pending. And like any referendum, and I think we said this on Friday, this is ultimately a question for the Dutch people to decide. So I'm not going to speculate about next steps or possible outcomes. As you noted, what we said on Friday was that we believe, or we support the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement because we believe it is in the interest of the United States, of the Netherlands, of the EU, to help ensure that Ukraine becomes a democratic and economically stable country. And we believe that this agreement can help foster that. We believe it will also help bring new economic opportunities for the EU, which includes the Netherlands, and for Ukraine. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Do you think a no vote would hand a symbolic victory to Vladimir Putin?
Again, I'm not going to, and I'm not going to speculate about the outcome of the vote, but, until we have a firm result. And as you said, let me finish. And as you said, it is like any of these votes. It's unclear what the motivation of the voters may have been when they cast their votes. Our intent in the statement that we gave on Friday was simply to express our views, why we believe an EU-Ukraine association agreement is in the best interest of the EU and of Ukraine. As to Monday morning quarterbacking or analysis after we have the final results, I'll wait for that.
Okay.
Please, sir.
As you say, you believe that a future association agreement between the Ukraine and the European Union is to be wished for. Do you think the United Kingdom should maintain its current relationship with the European Union?
Well, you know what we say about that, which is we support a strong UK within a strong EU.
Mm-hmm. And just a separate thing, unless anyone wants to follow up on that.
Well, I just want to know, so you're going to be prepared to do some Monday morning quarterbacking after the election results?
I think Kirby will be well prepared. No, look, I mean, we're not. Look, I mean, in all honesty,
are you seriously prepared to make some kind of an analysis of what it was once we know what the results were? Of what it meant, or are you going to say, well, the people of the Netherlands have spoken and c'est la vie, or whatever that is?
Whatever it is in Dutch, as to say. I think what we would be prepared to do is, again, to speak to why we believe that a positive vote in support of an association agreement is in the best interests, and which is what we've already stated, which is our sole intent behind the statement that we gave Friday was to simply.
I understand that, but you're saying you don't want to speak to it now because the vote isn't in. So when the vote comes back.
So I don't want to speak to the outcome.
I understand that. So, but you're suggesting that it's possible that you might speak to the outcome once we know what the outcome is. So does that mean that you would be prepared to congratulate or to welcome the choice of the people of the Netherlands if they vote in favor of the agreement, or you will condemn the people of the Netherlands for their horrendous choice in voting against it? Are you going to make a judgment as to?
Wait and see.
All right.
So my other question was on,
Yes,
on
sir.
Libya. I had
On
planned
Libya?
to ask you about the Tripoli government's decision to support the UN government, but since I planned that question, apparently they've denied having said that. So I suppose my question is, do you know what's happening in Libya, and do you welcome or deplore it?
Well, we certainly welcome what we see as the continued and positive steps in Libya since the Government of National Accord entered Tripoli a few days ago, March 30th. And yesterday there was a significant step, which is the State Council, which is a senior advisory body for the new unity government, and is made up of members of the GNC, the General National Congress, did meet officially for the first time. We also welcome the announcement by some former GNC members on the dissolution of the Tripoli-based National Salvation Government. More broadly, I'd just say, now is the time for all Libyans to continue to support the Government of National Accord. And we urge all Libyans to continue facilitating a peaceful handover of power so Libya's new leaders can begin the hard work of restoring stability to the country, which is absolutely urgent and vital.
Can we change topics?
David, you're on?
Okay.
Please.
We'll just get it out of the way. I want to move to the Palestinian-Israeli issue very quickly.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you about something that the Secretary said when asked by Charlie Rose last night.
Okay.
On what could be done. He said that we could develop or do some development in Area C, which is really
I'm sorry,
in
apologies.
Area C of the West
Okay.
Bank. Okay, which is really a far cry, from the enthusiasm where he started in 2013. Is the Secretary giving up on the peace process?
Not at all. And I'm certainly aware of what he said yesterday. I think what he was simply pointing to was sort of concrete gestures or steps that could be taken. And we talked about this a lot. The climate obviously has not been conducive to even getting back to a position where we can begin peace talks or negotiations again. So what we have said all along are the kinds of, we want to see kind of affirmative steps that reduce tensions and then promote this kind of climate. That's simply where we're at right now. But to say we've given up or to say that we're, not as ambitious as we once were, I think is incorrect. I think we're simply looking at the reality of the situation, and I think the Secretary was simply trying to lay out what he felt could be done given the current climate.
I understand, but
Yes,
all
sir.
things considered, is it plausible that we would see something that is an initiative of some sort that perhaps undertaken by the Secretary himself to get some sort of a process going?
Well, the Secretary remains in close contact with, obviously, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Palestinian Authority as well. And we certainly, our folks on the ground do, and Frank Lowenstein as well. We don't have anything to announce, obviously, right now, but we'll continue to look at a variety of options, as I said, that will hopefully start a trajectory that is more positive to future negotiations.
The period of Monday into Tuesday, the 24-hour period, the Israelis demolished a number of Palestinian homes, 7 homes, over a period of 24 hours. And I wonder if you have any reaction to that, and whether that does fall in your estimation or your judgment under collective punishment.
Well, we are closely following the demolitions and evictions, as you mentioned, that have been undertaken by Israeli authorities, I think in several locations along the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which have left many Palestinians homeless. In answer to your second question, I'd just say that we believe these actions are indicative of a damaging trend of demolition, displacement, land confiscation. We talked about that. That, alongside the settlement-related activity and continued constructions, is simply works against the possibility of a two-state solution. and calls into question the Israeli government's commitment to that two-state solution.
And finally,
Yes, sir.
today, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu he lauded his troops, which is, I guess he can do that, but he also encouraged them to continue doing what they're doing and suppressing and neutralizing terrorism, which is for the Palestinians really a call for more sort of extrajudicial executions and so on. I wonder if you have any reaction to that kind of talk that the Prime Minister, or that kind of tone that the Prime Minister
Well,
is using.
we have always supported Israel's right to defend itself. We strongly support that. I don't necessarily know that I would, I don't think it's proper to extrapolate from what he said that he was somehow promoting extrajudicial killings. We obviously have that particular case that you're referring to, incident, that is under investigation. Let's let that run its course. We have long called for, as Israeli security forces have reacted to these violent attacks and to the climate of tension and violence that is currently taking place or existing in Israel, that they exercise restraint and that they work to avoid any kind of innocent civilian casualties. And we would simply reiterate that.
Thank you.
Yep. Please. And then I'll get to you, I promise. Sorry.
Me?
It's your turn. Yes, I'm sorry.
Right, it's a different
Yeah.
subject
Yeah, of course.
regarding the Chibok girls. What has the U.S. government done since 2014 to help facilitate their return?
Right, you're talking about the Chibok girls from Nigeria. Well, it's the second anniversary, I think, coming up on that, and of course we call for all hostages, including these young women and girls who've been held by Boko Haram, to be released immediately without preconditions. We support Nigerian efforts to bring about the safe recovery of those kidnapped, and we continue to advise them on their response to this, as well as on general counter terrorism and counter Boko Haram efforts. And that assistance takes a number of, there's a number of forms, I guess. One is intelligence training. One is intelligence, of course, training, advice on strategic communications, but also victim support services and assistance to those who have suffered under Boko Haram. I think we've given upwards of 198 million in humanitarian assistance to the populations in Nigeria that have been affected by Boko Haram's continued attacks, terrorist activity. But it's a heartbreaking story. The situation of these young women who, as I said, were kidnapped. We continue to work and provide any assistance we can to obtain their eventual release.
As you said, it's been 2 years. Is there any plans to ramp up efforts?
Ramp up efforts in this particular regard? I mean, look, we're working closely. I mean, this is obviously a Nigerian government-led effort. I would say we've continued to ramp up efforts over the past couple of years, not only because of this incident, but because of repeated, ongoing Boko Haram terrorist activity, attacks on innocent civilians across Nigeria. I think certainly we recognize, and this terrible kidnapping was just a very vivid and heartbreaking example of it. But we realize that there's an urgency here, that Boko Haram is exerting a terrible influence and is really a scourge on the Nigerian population. So of course we're looking at ways that we can ramp up our support for Nigeria's security services. But as I said, also the other aspect of this is assistance, any assistance that we can provide to help the victims of these attacks, whether they're from the terrorist attacks or kidnapped victims as well. Please, go ahead and finish. Yeah.
One final.
No, it's okay.
And have these efforts been unilateral, or have you been working with other governments outside of the Nigerian government as well?
We have been working with other governments in the region, as well as I believe some some other governments. I don't have a list in front of me, but I think it's been a joint effort. We can certainly get that for you, of course.
On the same topic,
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why is Boko Haram not getting, the proper attention, like, let's say, ICE and so on? Is it something that, that seems so far away? Is it out of the public eye? Although it was the First Lady herself that basically carried a sign and said, bring our girls home. Why is that? Why, in your opinion?
So I would just circling back to her question, and I will get to you, but we do actually, another aspect of our efforts to assist is that we do have a team in Abuja who consists of specialists on temporary assignment from a variety of U.S. government agencies who are trying to work on assisting the Nigerian government on this particular case. So your question, sorry, is just...
Yeah, my question
Yeah.
is that, it seems off the radar screen, Boko Haram, although there was at the beginning a great deal, spotlighting of the issue, but then it seems to have faded away. Why is that?
I mean, we do speak, publicly about these attacks when they take place, condemning them, obviously, very strongly. I think, as we're doing even against ISIL, part of the challenge in all of these is trying to build the capacity of local government and local security forces to take the fight to these terrorist groups, because that's the ultimate solution, right? I mean, we've seen it in Iraq as well, is, the ultimate end game here is to build the capacity of local authorities to deal with these terrorists. And I think that requires a lot of effort, a longer period of training and assistance. But ultimately, as I said, is the better long-term outcome to build that capability, that capacity. And we've been doing that. As I said, we've been working with the Nigerian government over the past years. I certainly don't want to give the impression that it's somehow off the radar screen, because they have consistently carried out, as you note, a series of terrible attacks on innocent civilians, attacking churches, attacking villages, attacking innocent civilians in a variety of circumstances, and they need to be stopped. Please, sir.
President Buhari of Nigeria was in Washington, or the last time he was here bilaterally, I think he attended the nuclear summit. The last time he was here bilaterally, he complained that the degree to which you can receive direct military assistance in the US is curtailed by the Leahy Act, because Nigerian security forces are not regarded as proper partners because of their human rights record. Given who else you're working with around the world, I'm thinking about the Middle East, is it still the case that you can't give as much military assistance as Nigeria would want? And is it in fact the case that it's the Leahy Act that restrains that there are concerns about the human rights records of the Nigerian forces?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, and candid, I'd have to look into those his remarks about that. I can say that just as they are in the Middle East, any military equipment or assistance we have, or we give, rather, whether, as I said, to whatever country, whether it's in the Middle East or elsewhere in Africa, is subject to Leahy vetting. That's just something that we're required by law to do, for good reason. We cannot obviously give military equipment to units, battalions, what have you, that have been allegedly carrying out human rights abuses. That's just something we have to do for any of this stuff. That said, there are ways that we can still, and I believe we are, working effectively with the Nigerian government to provide them with the support they need.
It's just to
But
clarify,
yeah.
the previous question said we're doing everything we can within the limits of US law.
Precisely, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
When you say that
Yes,
you
sir.
can't give anything to military units that have carried out alleged human rights abuses, I mean, can you make that? You can't make that as a blanket statement, can you?
I just mean within the strictures of the Leahy vetting
Yeah, I know
process.
you're not supposed to under the law, but that doesn't always mean it happens, does it?
Well, again, I mean, we always apply. We have a team in our Democracy Human Rights Bureau that works
Yeah.
all the
but
time
you-
on these
But
these allegations and
but-
follows through on them and make sure that. So I mean, I
yeah,
can't.
but the allegation isn't necessarily an allegation of human rights abuse.
They
isn't-
investigate
isn't-
credible
isn't enough
allegations.
to stop the aid or assistance to a unit, is it? It has to be.
I mean,
It has to be. 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 It has to be I mean,
No, it has to be
There
credible, it
are-
has to be investigated.
there have been plenty of cases, I
Yeah.
think, in which allegations of rights abuses have been made, and assistance to those units has continued. Sometimes it has stopped if the allegations have
Right.
proven, but
Right.
the allegation isn't what
No,
triggers the.
that's a perfectly valid point, yes, Matt. Yes, but I'm gonna go to Dimitri and then I'll get to you later.
I would like to go for a minute to a subject of the latest secretary's trip to Moscow.
Okay.
Foreign Minister Lavrov, when he was wrapping up talks with Secretary Kerry, said, and I would like to quote him, that among other things, the two sides have agreed to, quote, establish a regular review of our, meaning U.S. and Russian, relations with the aim of finding mutually acceptable solutions to a number of problems. I was hoping you could give me some details on that. What specifically those arrangements entail? Is he speaking about a creation of some new mechanism, institutionalizing it, or is it just a part of a regular bilateral diplomatic dialogue?
It's a good question, and let me look into it. I'm not aware of any mechanism. My sense is that, as we've often talked about when we speak about U.S.-Russian relations, we have areas such as Ukraine that we disagree on, that are irritants, if you will, in the bilateral relationship, or challenges within the bilateral relationship. But as we've said before, there are also areas where we can work constructively with Russia, for example, on the Iran nuclear deal. And so as much as we can work effectively to discuss the full range of issues between our two countries, to mitigate the challenges, but also, and then to,
but
obviously.
he was referring
But yeah, it sounds like he
specifically
was, so
irritants,
that's why I
yeah.
don't want to, I don't want to speak and not have the correct information for you, so we'll take that. Of course you can.
The Russians have just said that, and are backing what the Syrian army said yesterday, was that a Su-22 was shot down yesterday in Syria. The Syrian army said it was shot down by an anti-aircraft missile. Has the U.S. been asked about this by the Russians?
We've not been asked about it. Well, I mean, the general procedure for this, as with any allegation of a violation, it would go to the task force and then be discussed there and determine whether it's an accurate allegation or not, and then action would be taken.
Is this in any way a breach of the ceasefire agreement?
Again,
I don't know.
without having kind of firm understanding of what happened, I think what I had just seen about that shoot down or alleged shoot down yesterday is that we just didn't have the details.
The Russians are in the task force and they're speaking about it.
Correctly.
Do they know more than you do?
But I don't. Again, I just don't have any more information to provide in terms of whether we believe it was. We, the United States, believe it was shot down by opposition forces. But as I said, there's a mechanism in place to discuss all of these violations, and let's not forget that there are also allegations of cessation of hostility violations on the part of the regime. So that's the function of the task force, to look at all of these and where we do find credible evidence to address them, working with the parties involved.
Reports that it was shot down.
I think that's correct.
So
We
you
just don't
haven't
have,
got
no, we don't have any, yeah,
you haven't got individual confirmation.
I do not.
Okay.
Some reports that claim that it was shot down by a manpad, an American-made missile.
Yeah, I've seen all the reports. I just don't have
So
any.
you
I've seen those
Do you have
reports. We don't have any.
information on
I don't have any more details to
Well,
provide.
some they even go as far as saying that it was actually supplied by the Saudis last February, to the opposition, and somehow Nusra got hold of it and so on. Would that be a warning that some of this weapon that
Well, again,
finds its way
not
to
speaking about
Nusra?
this specific incident, but we've said in the past about some of the equipment that we've seen, either through social media or what have you in Syria, displayed by various groups. It's unclear to us, frankly, given the dynamic environment, let's put it that way, on the ground there, that how somebody might obtain some of this equipment. It's not necessarily, my point is, it's not necessarily indicative or proof that somebody was given a particular type of weaponry.
Would you encourage or discourage your Arab allies and partners from supplying such weapons to various groups that act in Syria?
Well, what I would say to that is, given the current environment, which is that there is a cessation of hostilities in place, that we would encourage all sides to, or all parties to refrain from that kind of activity.
There clearly isn't a cessation of hostilities in place if people are
It's not
ceasing to hostile
we've never,
or whatever you
we've never claimed that this is free of any violations. It's not perfect, but we're going to continue to work at making it stronger.
Slow the disarming of the factions that you support in Syria since the start
Well,
of
we
the
never
cessation?
provided direct arms. What we've done is provided assistance, as we've talked about, to some of the groups fighting ISIL in the north. But that's all.
On the Syria talks,
Yes, sir.
Today, a spokesman for the Missouri, I believe Ahmed Fawzi, said that the government delegation would arrive late to the talks, to the April 11th talks, because of the election in Syria. Do you have any comment on the elections in Syria? Or on the whole thing?
Sure. Well, I think we've already spoken about
Yeah.
our views on holding elections in the current environment. We believe that really the focus should be on these proximity talks, on working towards a political transition that is acceptable to all the Syrian people. We don't believe the current environment is conducive to any kind of free and fair election. But in speaking to the timing or when they might arrive in Geneva to begin this next round of talks, that's something really that's a question for De Mistura to answer. But I think, without speaking for him, I think he'll simply take advantage of the fact that he'll have a couple of days perhaps to work closely with the HNC to sort of lay the groundwork until the regime negotiating party arrives.
And finally, today, I think Jabhat al-Nusra said that their spokesman over for us, Syria, was killed by an American strike. Can you confirm that?
I cannot confirm that at this time.
On China?
China, sure.
China has begun operations at Lighthouse on the South China Sea. Do you have any comment on that?
Aware of the reports. You're talking about the Subi Reef?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this is, of course, a disputed area of the South China Sea, and I just would say that constructing new facilities in these areas risks exacerbating or escalating what is already a tense situation. So we'd urge China to focus on reaching an understanding with other claimants, as we often have, on acceptable behavior in these disputed areas.
Well, does that mean that you think that the lighthouse should be taken down?
Well,
One of your,
I
I mean, I
think
don't
we
know,
have-
I'm not aware of this
I think
report.
what we-
Do you
sorry.
know, that a lighthouse has been
no, I said we've
constructed?
seen reports stating that they
Right.
will begin operating a lighthouse.
Okay. One of the reasons that you guys have taken an interest in this is because this area and expressed your concern about what the Chinese and indeed the other claimants are doing in terms of unilateral actions is for the protection and the safety of maritime shipping zones. Now, it seems to me that a lighthouse is not an inherently provocative thing. It's in fact there to be a safety measure. So, I mean, should no lighthouses be allowed in the South China, on disputed areas of the South China Sea, even if they help with maritime safety?
No, but it's unclear to us whether this is in the interest of maritime safety.
I have,
Sure, go ahead.
there are reports and some talk actually around town that makes it more than just reports about U.S. wanting to withdraw its troops from the Sinai force. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, we haven't, sorry, we remain fully committed to our multinational force and observers mission and the maintenance of the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. So no change in policy, no change in our force structure or whatever.
So, okay, so when you say you remain committed
Yep.
to it, that you remain committed to keeping,
The same structure, the same footprint.
all right, so these reports and chatter are wrong.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you reviewing the commitment?
I think what I said stands is that we remain fully committed to the MFO.
I have one more.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't think you're going to be able to answer this because one, it more has to do with Treasury, and two, it's just
Okay.
happened today. But Senators Rubio and Kirk introduced a legislation late this morning that would bar the administration from permitting kind of one-step removed dollar transactions for Iran of the kind that we've been talking
Right.
about and others have been talking about. Do you know, recognizing that this is mainly a Treasury thing, but do you know if the administration is this a necessary piece of legislation, or do you think it is unnecessary? And if you do think it's unnecessary, why?
So I would hate to speak on it before I've actually seen it or that we've actually properly studied it. I can simply say what we said and what Tom Shannon said yesterday on the Hill, which is that, the administration has not been and is not planning to grant Iran access to the U.S. financial system. I understand that's not what you're asking. You're asking about this other.
Well, frankly, I'm not sure exactly who it is that is saying that you're going to grant Iran access to the financial system. We certainly haven't said that in our reporting. The question that was raised to Ambassador Shannon yesterday in the Foreign Relations Committee that more directly addressed what it is that we understand the administration is considering was raised by Senator Rubio, and that is the allowing non-Iranian and non-U.S. banks to do trades in dollars for deals that involve Iran, as long as the dollars don't end up in the.
So my
Iranian
understanding is that
hands.
is not what's under consideration at all.
What is it under consideration?
I'm not going to say, except to say that no. But I mean, no, Matt. Just to clarify, okay. Let me.
Because in fact, that is what we understand as being.
I understand that you believe that's what's being considered.
Well, go ahead.
What I would say is that we continue to advise banks and other governments on ways that they can conduct business with Iran in a way that does not violate existing U.S. sanctions. And there are ways to do that, but it does not involve banks converting money to dollars or otherwise.
Well, it actually inherently does. So, but it does because as you know, the international commerce finance is structured in such a way that huge amounts of transactions from currency A to currency C go through currency B, which is the dollar.
I
But
understand
anyway,
that, but there are
so
other
you're saying
currencies.
right now that
I
you guys are
understand
out
currencies.
there. You guys are out there coaching.
Not
Well, advising.
Advising,
Okay,
but
that's coaching.
but
Coaching
that's-
banks and businesses how to do deals
Coaching is
in
what-
such a way. Well, you say you're advising them how
Yeah,
to
of course.
do deals in
But
such
I mean,
a
that's-
way that you can avoid the
So,
U.S. sanctions.
Matt,
Penalties for violating
what I would
US
say
sanctions.
in response.
Is that really the role?
So
of
what
the
I would
US
say in
government?
response is that as Iran complies with the JCPOA and receives a certain amount of sanctions relief, it is incumbent on us, and the Secretary spoke about this the other day, it is incumbent on us to live up to our end of this deal, which is to, and part of that is, is to advise these banks and governments on ways that they can
Avoid U.S. sanctions.
that they can, precisely that they can that they can work
Is that the role of the U.S.
within
government?
the
to go
no,
tell
but it's
people
but
how
it is
they can get
I don't
around?
I don't necessarily the idea of coaching. I think it's simply it's our obligation as part of the JCPOA to advise them that they don't. I mean, these banks don't want to violate existing U.S. sanctions.
Right. So you're telling them here's
But
how
they
you can
are,
do it
but they
without
are, no,
violating
but they
US
are,
sanctions.
sorry, but they are allowed to, under certain conditions, to do business with Iran. So it's, we do consider an obligation on how to correct, how to counsel them on that.
Right. You're basically telling foreign banks and foreign companies how they can use loopholes in U.S.
That's
sanctions.
not, no, that's
Yes,
not,
it is.
that's
To get her
inaccurate.
to avoid.
That's inaccurate, but.
Well, okay. Well, then what is it? What are they? They're telling them, here's what you can do to not violate U.S. sanctions. I understand the way you're putting it is, you're telling them what they can do that is legal.
I just
But-
think it is, again, it's part of an effort to provide guidance to ensure that they understand clearly the extent of U.S. sanctions relief. And it's complicated. And to advise them on that is not necessarily giving some kind of tacit approval to, or somehow some workaround by which they can avoid, or loopholes, as you put it. I think that's just not what we're trying to do.
But you're telling them how they can do business with Iran without falling afoul of U.S. sanctions. Is that not correct?
It's advising them on how they can do. I guess that they understand the extent of U.S. sanctions relief that's been provided under the deal, so that they can carry out appropriate actions, again, as stipulated under the JCPOA.
Right. Getting back to the
with the- yeah,
legislation,
sorry.
you think it's unnecessary? You don't. think
And my answer to that, sorry, was before I got sidetracked, was let's look at the legislation. That's okay,
Tom
Leslie.
Shannon's test me caused some confusion because he bluntly said, no, you're not considering it. Or was he, actually I'm thinking, was he particularly talking about not access to the US financial system? But the President and John Kerry, as well as Jack Lew, have basically admitted you're looking at this issue to clarify to businesses what is acceptable and what is not.
Correct, which is what I was trying, perhaps not well, to explain to Matt, is that we are trying to counsel them, but that does not mean that we're saying that, or we're planning to grant Iran access to financial system, U.S. financial systems, and I think that was the point that the President made, Kerry's made, Secretary Kerry's made. Sorry.
Are you
no one knows.
answering their questions when they come to you, or are you proactively going out? The Financial Times yesterday described it as a roadshow. Are you approaching foreign banks and telling them this stuff, or do you wait until they say, "Hey, we're planning to do such and such a deal with Iran"?
I wouldn't refer to it as a roadshow. I think we're advising them as appropriate.
But you're proactively advising them, or you're responding to
I don't know,
queries?
David. I just don't know the extent of how proactive we are about it. I think we're trying to do it within what we feel is our obligations under the JCPOA.
This is a straw man argument that people have set up based on maybe some incorrect assumptions or interpretations of what is it for. The question is not whether you're going to give them Iran access to the U.S. financial system. No one that I know of has.
Well, that has been
well,
levied, that charge.
Yeah, it has
Whether
been out
it's a
there,
straw man or not.
but it has been denied. That is no longer the issue.
But I understand what you're asking, which is through various or whatever that will somehow allow them to
manipulation.
transfer.
No, the whole
Money into
idea
dollars.
is that the whole idea is that the Iranians never touch the dollars themselves. But that they are able to take advantage of transactions that occur in dollars, shorthand being dollarized transactions. In other words, country X wants to sell or buy something from Iran, and that country's currency gets converted. Iran wants to be paid in euros. That country's currency gets converted into euros through dollars, as it often happens on the international exchanges. That is the question, and that when Ambassador Shannon was asked that question directly yesterday, he certainly didn't deny it. So anyway, that's the point about this. What brings about the question about this legislation that was introduced today. So if you say that no, that is not at all what is part of it, then I think logically you would say, well, this legislation is unnecessary because we weren't planning to do that.
Haven't seen the
anyway.
legislation. I'm simply was stating that, we don't believe that that's a necessary formula as well in order to comply with the JCPOA and our obligations under it. But I would defer, obviously, to
All right.
numerous experts at the Department of Treasury.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rock? Okay. Are
Yes.
you aware of efforts last week to basically force Haider Abadi, the Prime Minister of Iraq, out of office because he wants to introduce, or he introduced a number of new ministers and so on to fight corruption, and that in fact in that effort you and the Iranians worked together to prevent such a movement by certain coalitions within the government. Are you aware of that?
That we worked with the Iranians?
Yes, yeah.
I'm not aware of
you
that.
And whether, directly or indirectly, you and Iran worked to prop up Haider Abadi, the Prime Minister of Iraq.
I'm not aware of that. I mean, as I think we already said, we do support his reform efforts. Frankly, this is an internal matter, though, for the Iraqi government. But I don't have anything to specifically talk about any kind of collaboration we may have carried out with the Iranians. I just don't have
All
any.
reports suggest that,
I haven't seen those
there
reports.
was actually a list of 14 new members that he's shared with you on possible replacement for existing ministers and so on. Can you confirm or deny?
I can't. Sorry. Thanks, guys. So.